Hello all my beautiful crafters. Today I'm going to show you how to make an embroidered poo bag from Off With Their Threads embroidery. I absolutely love these poo bags, and there are two ways to do them. You can do them the traditional way, which is completely in your embroidery machine. I have a 10 needle brother embroidery machine, so these whip up super fast. But if I'm gonna make a bunch of them, I actually take them over to my sewing machine and do them there. I stitch out the design on the embroidery machine, so that's a must. You have to have an embroidery machine in order to do these, unless you just want to make the bag. That's an option too. But she has a ton of these designs, so it's Off With Their Threads, and I will link it down below. She has a Facebook group. It's so much fun. I have sold so many of these. They are so worth the price, and she frequently has sales, so she's extremely generous. But her designs are always the best seller for me. So these poo bags, I sell them when I go to the markets for $15. I don't have a problem selling them. I do not line my bags. There is an option to line them that is in the design. You can skip that if you want to. I do not line mine. I've never had anyone complain about that. You have some other options that you can do. I've seen people make them into purses, so you could just put some straps up here and have yourself a little purse. You can make it a little bit bigger so that your cell phone fits inside of there too, and you can really customize these. When you do them in the hoop, this is the size that it will be, so it's a little bit smaller than when I do them on my machine. When I do them on my machine, I just make them just a little bit taller, depending on the design. So I find this way to be very fast because I can stitch two in my machine, and while I am stitching those out on the embroidery machine, I can get everything ready to sew. And I'll actually stitch a bunch of these out and just keep cutting them down and have a big stack, and then one day I'll sit and binge watch something cheesy on Netflix, and I'll just make a whole bunch of them. So let me show you how to make these, and you can, when you're finished, you can attach a split ring. You can attach a D-ring with a swivel clasp. You can use a carabiner, which I often call a cravat. So if I do that in this video, that's why. So let's go ahead and get started. These are so much fun. You're gonna love them. And if you do markets, I'm telling you, they're gonna be a great seller. There are so many different designs, so many different dog breeds, sayings. There are even little baby ones. There's a duck for a baby shower. You can definitely, I use these all the time when my kids were babies, 25 years ago almost. So I used these all the time. A little duck, there's a little boy, a little girl. I own every single one of these designs that she has made, and they're all amazing. So let's get started. So your poo bag designs are going to come with two files. It's going to come with the bag, which means that you're going to do the entire bag, the entire project in your embroidery machine. That's called in the hoop. ITH is what it is abbreviated as, in the hoop. You also are going to get a standalone, which is for the poo bags, but you can use that standalone design on anything. You can put it on a shirt, on a bag, on, you know, on anything. You don't have to use it as a poo bag. So today we're going to use the standalone design. I find this much more efficient to be able to stitch these out and then cut just a flat panel and take it to my sewing machine and just sit and stitch. They whip up really, really fast this way. So if you're making them to sell, I would suggest giving this a try and seeing what you like better. So depending on your machine, you're going to need to go ahead and set up your design now. I need to tell my machine when it needs to stop. I don't do the circle for the bag opening because I put a grommet in, so I'm going to go ahead and skip those steps. And then we're going to see that this is telling me it's going to stitch out in 15 minutes. It's going to take longer than that because I will have to go and cut out my applique. So I need to assign my colors now. And if you have a single needle machine, you will be changing that yourself, so you really don't have to worry about that. And if you have a multi-needle machine, you know how to set this up. So, okay, So we're gonna go ahead now and get this started. So I put my vinyl right about in the center of my frame. If I were doing multiples in the frame, which I normally do, I would just cut a sheet of vinyl to the entire size of the frame and push the designs to either side so that there's more room in the center. I leave about 1.5 inches on each side of the design. So let's go ahead and get that placement stitch started for our applique outline. Okay, that's a little hard to see, but the outline is there now for the dog. So I'm just gonna lay my faux suede over top of it and let that go ahead and stitch out. All right, now I need to remove the excess faux suede so that the satin stitch can go around and there won't be any raw edges. You want to get your cut as close to that placement stitch as you can. Or tack down, that's the tack down stitch. If you cut into the thread, it's not that big of a deal. You just don't want to cut your material on the other side of the thread. I do cut into the thread and it's not the end of the world. I don't do it on purpose, but sometimes I cut in there in these tight spots and it's not the end of the world. But you don't want to cut your material on the other side of that thread because the satin stitch may not cover that up. So it can be challenging to get into these little spots. Some people have success using a seam ripper. I don't. I'm not that confident with my seam ripper that it's going to not go through everything, so I don't use it. I do like these little applique. These are the koi scissors. These are my favorite. I have a bunch. I have the duck bills and a couple of different brands of those, and I have some other small scissors, but these are definitely my favorite. They don't have a huge curve on them, but just enough to get into the little spots. And if I'm gonna do a few of these, I will cut the applique out on my scan and cut, and then I will just spray the back or use a little glue stick and glue it down, and then I can zip right through them. But that's only if I'm gonna do a bunch. Otherwise, if you're just doing one, it's not as efficient to transfer your file and everything and cut it out. It takes just as long just to cut it out by hand. But if you're gonna do a bunch and you have them ready for next time, then yes, the scan and cut is great. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna let the rest of the bag stitch out. right, it's done embroidering, so let's put our grommet hole in it. Okay, let me see if this one works a little better. There it goes. Now you hear the pop. So I have two presses, and I have an innie and an outie. So this one cuts the hole, and this one is a little bit higher, so I wasn't getting enough pressure on there. So that's what that was about. So this is the hole cutter, and then here I'm going to put my grommets in here. So I'm going to push the grommet in like that, and you'll see it sticking out. We're going to put it face down, and then we're going to put this little backing. I've heard some people don't use the backing. I do use it, and I don't have a problem with it. So I'm going to press that down, and that's much easier to do on a flat panel because I don't have to reach inside of the bag, inside of the zipper. So much easier. Now let's cut it to size. Okay, so I'm gonna leave about 1 inch across each side. So we'll square this up so it's gonna be a little taller than it is wide. So just put your 1 inch all across line it up with the furthest point to the right, and then do the same thing here on the bottom. Just line your 1 inch up there. And you can make these whatever size you want. If you want to make them longer or shorter, but just make sure you leave enough room for your seam allowance there. Okay. And then we already have 1 inch up here. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to just measure this. So we're at about 4 3/4, just under that. And I'm going to cut a piece of top 4 3/4 by 1 inch. And you don't even have to measure it if you don't want to. You can just line it right back up with your bag, just like that. If you want that to be a little taller, you can definitely adjust it to be whatever size you want it to be. So if you don't want to use numbers and things, just line it up right there, and you can even trim it afterwards after you sew your zipper on. It just depends on how much you want to do. You're going to do the work. You're either going to do it before or you're going to do it after, so it just depends on what you prefer. Okay, let's take it over to our sewing machine. If you haven't sewn with vinyl before, you really need a Teflon foot. If you don't use a Teflon foot, your vinyl is going to drag and it will rip. So you don't want that. So you can pick one up pretty cheap on Amazon. They're a couple bucks. You just have to know if your machine is a low shank or a high shank. You can read your manual to find out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to clip the end of my zipper so that it stays together. I'm going to unzip it because see how long the zipper is? It's very, very long. We don't need it to be that long. I'm going to use a scrap piece of vinyl, and I'm going to make some zipper tabs out of this so that when the zipper stops, it's not just going to go flying off. So I am going to just put it to the left of where I want it to be, where I want the zipper end to stop, and it doesn't matter at this end where you put it. So we're just gonna go ahead and sew this up. I'm gonna use a 2.5 inch stitch length. And you want to back stitch front and back. So this doesn't matter so much because we're not going to see the additional. It's going to get sewn in there, the excess, so don't worry about if it's straight or not. It really doesn't have to be perfect. So when you fold it over, we're just going to give it a little top stitch there. We're not going to sew back and forth when we top stitch it, and that's just to tack it down here. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to put it up next to our bag, and we're gonna just kind of line it up there. And now we know that we want the other zipper tab to go right about here, because we don't want it on the end, or else it won't have anywhere to go. It won't even pull back and forth. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to kind of line it up here, and we're going to center all this later, so it doesn't matter. So we're just going to line this up here, and we're going to sew right down here. You turn it around if you want to, or you can sew it on the other side. And we want to sew back and forth. Okay, and then do the same thing where you're going to fold it over and just give it a top stitch, and this way you don't have to sew back and forth at the beginning and the end. Okay? Pretty simple, right? Good. So now what you want to do is you have to decide if you want your zipper to go from left to right. I don't overthink that. We have right-handed people and left-handed people in our family, so I don't really care. I try to do zippers for both sides, and I've never had anybody pick up a bag and say, oh, I wish the zipper was going the other way. So I'm just going to trim off this excess here, just to keep it out of my way. That's the only reason. And I'm just gonna kind of center that there so that we have the same amount of tabs on both sides. You can cut your zipper end off here if you want to get that out of your way. Make sure that you're using plastic zippers and not metal teeth if you're going to be sewing over them. So I'm just going to close my zipper up so that it's easier to sew on right now. And I am going to place it here and just kind of center it. You can clip it if you're a clipper. I'm not a clipper, not for these short lengths anyhow. If it was really long, maybe I would. So I'm just going to give this about 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch down my zipper. And I am going to back stitch back and forth all the way to the other side. And if you need to, you can move your zipper when you get near it. Make sure you're in a needle down position, lift your foot, and move your zipper to the other side. That'll give you a nice even edge. If you're using a zipper foot, you can just zip right through that. The zipper foot is narrower, so you don't have to move that zipper head back and forth. Oops, and I'm gonna back stitch. Okay, there we go. So now I am going to fold it back, and I'm gonna give it a top stitch so that that zipper stays down. When you do the top stitch, you just want your foot, you want this fold to be right inside of the foot, and you can adjust your stitch length to a longer stitch length if you want, but you don't have to back stitch when you're doing a top stitch. It's just to make this lay flat and it will look neat. If you want to get fancy, you could do it in a different color. You could do a decorative stitch, but I'm not doing all of that for this video. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. What we want to do, this is for the top of the bag, and what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we're lining this piece up with our actual bag, not with the zipper or the zipper tags, okay? So we're going to line that up there with the edges, and I'll go ahead and close this so that's out of the way for a minute. And if you want to clip it, you can clip it. Just don't pin. You don't want to pin vinyl. Okay, and we're going to do 1/4 inch, and we're going to back stitch. Nope, it caught. It's fine. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to top stitch it down. And no back stitch. Okay, so that's super easy, right? So what we're going to do now is just trim your sides up so that you don't have that left over there. Okay, do that on both sides. And now all we need to do is put our tag in here. If you're going to put a tag or a strap, a wristlet strap, whatever you're going to do, I'm going to use a piece of nylon webbing. And then it can clip to your keys or whatever. So we're going to put that in, but we're also going to put our backing on at the same time. So we only have one thing left to do. At this point, you want to make sure that your zipper is undone. Otherwise, you might be upset when you get done with the next step. Okay, so open that up. So I'm going to use a piece of nylon webbing, seatbelt webbing as my little loop here. And you want to cut it, I cut mine at 4 inches, and then you want to burn the ends with a lighter so that it doesn't unravel. That's really, really important. This stuff likes to unravel if you just leave it alone, if you leave it unsupervised. So what we're going to do is we are going to cut our back to the same size as the bag. And I like doing it like this. I mean, you could pre-cut all of your stuff, but if you have a design that's a little bit bigger and you want to make your bag a little bit bigger just so it showcases better, I like doing it this way where you just kind of line everything up afterwards. But if you want to pre-cut, decide what size you want your bags to be and then just have at it and pre-cut all of your stuff. This also allows me to use a lot of scraps doing it this way. So I just lay it over top there like that, and then I'm going to decide which side do I want my loop on, and I'm the same way with the loops as I am with the zippers, and that is that I don't care which way they go. I like to have options for both. So what I'm going to do is that raw edge needs to be inside your bag. So you want the nice part, the loop, to be touching the nice part of your bag. That raw edge needs to be hanging over. And then you're just going to take your back and you're going to put your back on there, and then you can clip all around, and then we're going to take it back to the sewing machine. Make sure that zipper is open. So when you go over your loop, you want to go back and forth over this, maybe just one additional time. Vinyl doesn't like for you to go back and forth over it several times, so it's going to depend on your vinyl if it's going to tolerate that or not. If it tolerated a satin stitch with the applique, you should be able to go over it 1 or 2 times, but you want to make sure that that one is really locked in there. Okay, so let's go back to the machine. Okay, so I had a little tension issue there, so I corrected that. So you're going to sew, don't start in the corner. You can start wherever else you want, but just don't start in the corner. So I'm going to start a little bit in. I'm going to back stitch both ways, beginning and end, and I'm going to stitch all the way around. Now make sure that your zipper head, the tab of it, is not going to be underneath your needle when you're going over. So you want to make sure that this part, the part that you actually grab, is not down there. You will bust your needle and potentially lose an eye. Make sure this stays straight, your little strap there. If it moves a little bit, it's not the end of the world, because of the way that these hang anyhow. So you want to go over that. I would go over it just once, at least once, I should say. If your vinyl is pretty good, if it's really good quality, you want to go over it twice, that's fine, but I think 1 time is sufficient. And when you get back to the beginning, you want to go ahead and back stitch. There we go. Okay, so we're all stitched up, and we're going to turn it right sides out through this zipper. You can clip your corners if you want to make them turn a little bit easier. My tension looks a little loose there. I just had a tension issue. So I think I'm gonna correct that again and do one more lap around this before I turn it. Okay, so I just went in and did a second line right inside of the other one. And if you have to go back and sew over something, you should do that with vinyl, because it's really not that forgiving if you're gonna sew in the same holes again. Think of it as like an ex-mother-in-law. It really doesn't forgive. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this right side out now, and we'll see what we got. All right, so I got it all turned. I pushed my corners out there. You have to be careful with vinyl popping the corners out, but just use something like a blunt knitting needle, not anything that's really, really sharp. And if it doesn't want to come all the way out, that's totally fine. But I think it's absolutely adorable. I put a split ring on it with a D-ring and a swivel clasp. You can use carabiners or cravats, as I like to call them. I don't know, I associate mountain climbing with cravats and the carabiners. So anyhow, I put a poo bag in there. I get them on Amazon. They're $22 a roll. And as I said earlier, these are good sellers for me at markets. I sell them for $15. I don't line them. You definitely don't have to line them. I know some people will line just the panel where the bags go, and that's perfectly fine. There are many different ways to do this, but I wanted to share with you today how I do it, and I hope that you will go ahead and try, and maybe you like doing it this way. Maybe you still like doing them in the hoop. Maybe you like doing them both ways. But either way, I wanted to give you another option for how you can customize them and do it a little quicker if you're going to go ahead and make a ton of these. And don't forget that these standalone designs don't have to be for poo bags. You can put these on anything. You can skip doing the opening and just use that dog. There are so many dog designs that she has, so many different designs. So she even has side ones so that they're not all the bum, but you can make those and just put them on all kinds of things, bags and tote bags and small purses, whatever you want. So think outside the box and skip some of the steps, and you have not only a poo bag design, but you also have a dog to put on other things. All right, so I hope you'll give it a try. If you have any questions on specific things, go ahead and leave them below. I wanted to try to make this video as short as possible. Never really happens, but if you have specific questions, leave them below, and if I need to do another video with specifics, I will. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.